In the roguelike genre, there are two ends on the spectrum. On one hand, you have the games that limits your build creativity by not allowing you to have too many items at one time, but still having a polished and predetermined experience like Dead Cells or Hades. And on the other hand, games that give you enough resources to allow you to go nuts and do whatever you want. I'm talking roguelikes about Binding of Isaac and Noida. They're basically the devs saying, go ahead, try and break our game, we dare you. My guilty pleasure for the past 2 weeks has been a Vampire Survivor lookalike that could sell as a flash game on Newgrounds, Brotato. The controls are super simple. WASD to move. Oh, that's it. You battle hordes of aliens in a square arena and you can hold up to 6 weapons at once and they will auto-attack, though there is an option to make it manual. Collect enough green goop from dead enemies to level up your bro and also buy items to beef up your build even more. Each wave will last around a minute and you can reroll your level up stats or shop items for a chance to get better ones. I played my first run and was like, yeah, I'm probably not playing this for more than an hour. The overly simplistic controls, the lack of player agency, the same old environment running away from the same enemies, it didn't strike me as a type of game that would challenge me. It felt like except from running away from enemies, there's way too much luck involved in the outcome of the run. It's a far cry from Dead Cells, where if you had good knowledge of the game and are skilled enough to navigate around it, you could win the run, and it felt like you did it because you were just good at playing the game. I never felt that way in my first couple Brotato runs. I got decently far into some waves, died randomly, and was ready to put this game on the shelf and move on. That was until I played another run and got far enough into it that I started popping heads left and right, and eventually, I got to wave 20, beat the boss, and won. What seemed like such a random process of buying weapons and items that I thought were useful actually ended up paying off. So was I just lucky? Was my random buying spree just happen to have the best upgrades? I looked at my build that won the run, and asked myself, what about it that was different from my failures? This was when I learned about the game's many upgradable stats, and was the moment that the game finally clicked for me. In pretty much every roguelike I play, I go through sort of an aha moment, an instant bolt of inspiration where I understood how the game worked. See, in Brotato there are a lot of characters. A handful of them are unlocked right from the get-go. You could start with the all-rounder, but you'll probably be overwhelmed by the number of choices since it doesn't specialize in anything. This is probably going to be discussed in a separate video, but I think games that give zero tutorials or guidance on how to get started with it will just lead to players getting frustrated and leaving the game. I think games should hold the player's hand, at least for a little bit. I couldn't get into Don't Starve because of the lack of direction. This was my first impression with Brotato as well, and a personal piece of advice is that you don't start with the all-rounder. Pick any other bro and you'll realize that they tend to guide you to selecting a very specific setup. The brawler is handy with unarmed weapons, so you'll probably want weapons like the fist, palm, and the power fist, since they all scale with melee damage. And since they all scale with melee damage, you'll probably want melee damage and not ranged. If you play the ranger, you'll probably gravitate towards a gun build. It was then I realized that you get bonuses for having weapons that are the same or belonging in the same category. It's very similar to how in Dead Cells, when you level one color and get weapons belonging to that one color only. This was when I started to focus on specializing in leveling stats and going for builds that best suited for the bro that I'm playing as. There's quite a selection of weapons in the game, and most of the time, they're affected by a certain stat point, which in turn is usually determined by which bro that you play as. You can go the melee route, wielding mighty spears and swords to keep monsters at bay. You can become a gun nut and invest into ranged, wielding your double minigun and grenade launchers. You can become a mage, slinging spells and casting fire magic via every mage's favorite wand, the flamethrower. Or just don't do anything yourself and let your army of turrets and mines do all the work for you with an engineering build. Brotato is also one of those roguelikes where you'll never feel like you're completely safe. You could become an unkillable god like in Binding of Isaac, but the scaling in Brotato will eventually catch up with you. Sure, you could abandon all of your HP hit points and invest fully in damage or attack. You can't really blame anyone when you suddenly get one-shotted out of nowhere. So that's it then, right? Just get whatever upgrades best suit your build, then watch as your bro becomes unstoppable. Well, just like any game, it gets deeper than you think. The game runs until wave 20, and assuming you beat wave 20, then the run is counted as a win. You get an option to go endless to see how far you can push your build, which is what most people go for. If you are going for an absolutely insane build, you'll have to manage your resources well, as making even the smallest mistakes can end your run. For example, I had an item that boosted my overall damage by 20%, but every time I took damage in a wave, my damage would reduce by 2%. So just don't get hit. Easy. Of course, later in the run, I wasn't paying attention to my items and picked up Bloody Hand, where I get a huge damage boost for every point of lifesteal I had. But I will take 1 point of damage every second. The idea is that you'll lifesteal enough to make up for the constant damage that you take. You can probably see where this is going. I then realized this was a big mistake. I was losing damage every second in a wave because of this interaction. Now, I still won the run, but I could have gone even further in the endless mode if I didn't make this mistake. This is an example of how even one blunder in Brotato can mean the end of your run. What I first thought was a shallow run-and-gun arena shooter turned out to be something much more complex, where on the highest difficulty, not prioritizing the correct stats can end your run before your build even got off the ground. There's also a difficulty system called danger levels, 0 being the easiest and 5 being the hardest. You begin to see what is known as elites at certain levels. Enemies hit harder, there's a horde wave where you'll almost certainly get overwhelmed, and in Danger 5, they put an extra boss on wave 20 just for good measure. I spent a decent amount of time in endless mode as well, and this is usually where you're pushed to your absolute limits. And when times get like these, you better hope to be a bullet hell master because it gets pretty intense. There's enough distinction between each class that often serves as a soft tutorial on its own on how you should prioritize your builds. Each bro represents a unique problem that you have to solve. The Doctor is a life-sucking leech that regens health like a madman. Forget about speed and damage because you can walk through hordes of monsters while being a self-sufficient machine. The multitasker can carry up to 12 weapons instead of the usual 6. There's a weapon in the game called the Stick that increases its damage for every stick that you have. Now that's some lateral thinking. The Pacifist gets more resources for every enemy still alive at the end of a wave, so abandon damage altogether and run supportive weapons like the Palm that knocks things away or heal using the medical guns. What I find really fascinating with Brotato that's different from other roguelikes is that the damage is not the ultimate end goal of the build. As long as that timer counts down to 0, each wave counts as a win. Even if you defeat a boss encounter, you still have to keep playing the level until the count ends. This means you don't actually have to find the best weapons or synergies that deals the best damage. If you were speedy enough and you could dodge those projectiles Genshin style, you can keep going without hurting a soul. The game surprisingly was developed from a solo developer. Other than having a particular fond for games centering around potatoes, the game itself is really well made. I didn't encounter any bugs at all, and given its low system requirements, I'd be really surprised if you couldn't run this game. You might also be impressed by the game's soundtrack. I was too, but the truth is, this entire soundtrack is actually just 6 tracks put on loop that's taken straight from no copyright sounds. I guess one person can't do everything, so I don't really have a problem with that. The game is also on mobile with a free version and a premium one. Surprisingly, it's got a tutorial to get you started, something the Steam version didn't have. Though I do need to mention that the mobile version has some daily rewards, microtransactions, and always requires an online connection, which is of course some of everyone's favorite modern video game mechanics. There's a reason why Vampire Survivors is one of the most satisfying roguelikes to play. Mowing down endless waves of monsters with your mighty minigun or warding them off with your fists. There's so many ways to get creative and room for you to improve. What I originally thought was a monotonous grindy game with a low skill cap offered a lot more than I imagined. Brotato has one of the strangest allures as a roguelike. It's challenging enough that you do feel like you have agency in the outcome. The runs are short enough that even if you lose, you feel as if your time wasn't completely wasted. It's got that addictive nature to make you say, okay, just one more run. Alright, that was just a warm-up, let's go again. Okay, I feel like I almost had it. Just one more. Okay, just one more run. This is the last one. Alright, this run is the last one for real, and... Oh my The subtle complexities and high skill ceiling when it gets to the higher stages is a puzzle that even experts will need to solve. And it's something I will be spending way longer than I expected to figure out. The last time I had this much fun with a new roguelike was Hades. If I were to give Brotato a rating, I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5. A 3 out of 5 game for me is the golden standard that I would say I can safely recommend to other people. Brotato goes beyond that, and despite its simplistic controls, actually goes pretty deep in its mechanics to draw you in. It's one of those games that's the dictionary definition of easy to pick up, hard to master. And it will go down in my games backlog as one of the stupidest games that I just can't put down. Thanks for tuning into this roguelike review. I wasn't planning to do a video like this, but since I like Brotato so much and there was so much to talk about, it definitely warranted a video on its own. I hope you enjoyed this first time review, and if you want me to review other roguelikes, be sure to let me know which ones in the comments. Thanks for watching, and always remember, have fun with the game.